Our final presentation of the conference is not the least important, obviously. You have seen where we've had robust content all through. And I want to talk, or he wants to talk for a few minutes about the status of nuclear power plant builds in the United States. Bob Nussmeier, come ahead, Bob, is Vice President with Baker Construction. He's been a longtime friend of Kurt's, a longtime friend of the industry and of many of you. And he will be sharing with us what needs to be done in terms of satisfying this surging need for electricity and clean power from his perspective from Baker Concrete Construction. A terrific resource, a go-to, a personal and professional friend and colleague. Bob, come ahead and share with us at this time. Let's welcome him to the stage.
Thank you, sir. Good job. So you have a challenge with currently dealing with the side effects of maybe too much drink last night or maybe the night before, and then you've got the rush for lunch. Your stomach's going like this, and of course, many of you need to run to the airport. I have a passion to speak with you about zero emissions. Carbon emissions into the atmosphere, while we do produce enough electricity to sustain our electrification and our needs for technology, data centers, chip plants. And obviously you all know that the answer is let's start building more power plants that are fired by nuclear processed fuels. The real question is it ever going to happen? So let's get serious about a hell of a lot of new combined cycle gas-fired power plants because we're going to run out of juice. So that's what I'm going to talk about. We're in a huge state of unknowns with the Trump administration freezing all monies in the energy department and miscellaneous other areas to reshuffle the prioritizations, right? Hopefully, one of those prioritizations will be able to supply us long-term electricity at a place that can get to your site through transmission or otherwise, and a predictable long-range cost. So that's what I'm going to talk about very quickly. So what's nuclear power generation? Why is it getting such a strong look? I want to talk about that. What are some of the real issues from an honest point of view of what's going to have to be fixed before this dream comes true? And then what are some of the impacts and responsibilities each of you in the room as part of CURT have related to this, the responsibility of doing that? So these are some of the things I'm going to talk about, but most of all, I want to talk about the options of power, and then what are the specific obstacles surrounding with nuclear, and go from there. Currently, we've got a lot of issues surrounding nuclear. You've got where's the money coming from, whether it's public or private. You've got how the Nuclear Regulatory Commission regulates and processes designs and construction site permits to build. You have huge issues on technologies of what's the cool new thing relative to small modular reactors, and then permitting, labor costs, not in my backyard, all that jazz. When I look at Kirk's roles, I'll talk about, are you an investment or an investor? Are you the owner? Are you the engineer and constructor? Are you having substantial impact on procurement? Remember the old days that was engineering-led construction, and then now through lean construction and many other things, it's construction-led engineering? Well, we know where we're at now. It's completely supply chain-led construction in this whole area. So we've really got to solve some issues relative to that. Watch what's going on the next 4 months to 6 of what's going on with the administration and the regulation and laws attached to affecting nuclear power. I think will be a substantial changes. I do not know what those are. I will tell you what I think some of the options are, but we'll see how it turns out depending upon how many folks in this room have good friends that are senators and congressmen, because it's going to be that type of pressure that's going to make change happen. What kind of loan guarantees? How do we cap risk on cost and performance in other areas so that we can get investment money to come forth? I was at a financial seminar in New York a few months ago where it was mostly just venture capitalists and private equity. And I was floored of the amount of money, almost $56 billion that they want to let go to fund these power plants. But obviously, the risk has got to be capped and understood and underwritten in order to make this happen. So even if before the government funds and grants and loans, subsidies, and before all those, there's a bunch of private capital ready to jump all over that. As you know, data centers are going from 4 to 6 to 7 to 8 to 9% consumption of all the electricity, whether it's renewable or fossil or hydro or whatever. They're consuming more and more and more. And in order to continue to build, they must have sources of electricity that are not only available, but they are some degree of predictable future cost. And those two things are big nuts to fill right now, and there's a lot of utilities scrambling. The demand for electricity, as a lot of you know, is getting not only in the semiconductor business, and not only in the chip plants and AI plants, but also just electrification, right? You see it going on in the plants, you see it in oil and gas conversion, you see it out upstream where they're converting to electrification. You see LNG export terminals have gone to all electric drives. That's a bunch of juice. I mean, a bunch of juice that's required. And then all the cars that are electrified, the trucks, and overall transportation. So the demand keeps going like crazy. If you look at the different forms of power available today to supply us with those electrons, and you understand what this is saying, nuclear seems to be one of the best choices, particularly relative to zero emissions and long-term costs. Yes, Vogtle was a very expensive project, but during that project and that investment of $35 billion to build those, they learned how and why and put together a NRC package, Nuclear Regulatory Commission package now, that allows someone to go out and build that design almost tomorrow if you've got the money and you got a location. At probably, and I'm just guessing, probably have a few people here that were on Vogtle that will think I'm crazy, but probably somewhere around 40% discount from what those cost in Georgia for Southern, just because now they know what to do and what to build, and the designs have been sought through, the processes, the schedule, the sequencing, how it's built is now very well understood. So we can duplicate it. We just need, 10 billion and let's rock and roll. So if you go down all the different areas of choice through renewable to fossil fuels to geothermal to hydro, there's your choices, there's your outcome. And you really do have some compelling reasons to go nuclear. Hydro, wind, solar, all those are great, but limited. Emissions is real, so scrubbing is important. Clean the gas before it goes into the combined cycle power plant, clean it as the emissions go out the chimney. Drops the environmental impact of that type of a power considerably. Yes, there's a lot more cost involved, but it works. And it gives us a short-term solution today to fill the gap for the shortage of electrons that we're going to be seeing significantly in the next 5 years. As it relates to nuclear, you've got a number of different choices. You can restart at an existing plant that is currently shut down, like they're doing at 3 Mile Island. You can bolt on some more capacity addition to the existing site of an operating nuclear plant. You can build consistently light water reactors like the Westinghouse AP1000, which is what was done at Vogtle, and you can continue to build those with certainty of outcome because now they pretty much understand it. Or you can do something pretty cool and get into the small modular reactor space because of it, if its ability to be used and manufactured in a controlled environment in a plant, a manufacturing fabrication plant. Dig a big hole, drop it in that hole, connect a few pipes, back the Baker truck in and pour 25,000 yards of flowable fill, and you're ready to turn the thing on. Maybe it's only going to do 300 or 400 megawatts, but you can do it in the campus. You can run all the electricity requirements at Purdue University or at Dow Chemical with this nice little plant that'll cost you $2.5 billion, and it'll last 30 to 70 years of predictable cost of what the electrons will cost, whether you're generating steam or electricity. So you got some cool choices. The variables that make this whole thing a bit challenging is, over the years we've created an excellent group called the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and they are responsible for the licensing and the on-site overseeing of compliance of everything that's safety related. And when I say safety, we do a lot of safety related concrete construction. And yes, we want to be safe and no injuries and everybody go home without injury and go see their family and all that jazz, and yes, that's safe. It's the safety part that we do well because it is all areas of construction that potentially could be exposed to radiation. And in those environments, that construction and engineering process is called safety related, and it's tough. And NQA1 quality is required, and NQA1 quality certification is a very detailed process of quality to make sure that there is no potential of exposure of radiation exposure. So that's a big deal. NRC is a bit slow in processing the good, okay sign-off of new technologies. Most of the new technologies are in that category of small modular reactors. There's at least 5 or 6 technologies in the United States, global, that are currently, way down the road of development, but the NRC has not approved any of them. I say that NuScale did get a license, but the other ones are in the process of doing that. It shouldn't take 6 years to get that done, and that's got to get fixed. Design certification approved by the NRC and the engineering, and then being able to obtain a COLE, which is a combined license that you have to have that says, yes, the technology and the construction of the nuclear island, or in SMR cases, the fabricated nuclear vessel made somewhere, is good, the site is good, and the construction approach is good, go. Should that take 8 or 9 or 10 years to get that? Maybe, but it will not allow us to get where we want to go to supply the electrons if we go at that pace. So I'm going to show you some things. Let's look at some timelines real quick of different approaches. Nuclear power plants restart. Good example, Holtec in the Palisades in Michigan is going to restart a reactor. What's that timeline look like? 3 Mile Island is going to restart a reactor. What's that timeline look like? So they have to get a renewal coal license, which, what do we think, 2 to 3 years total right now? This is today. This is not necessarily 6 months from now when the House and the Senate pass legislation that allow the NRC to have substantial modifications that allow them to push the licensing process much faster. But, and then you got to go to actually getting in there, fixing whatever needs to be fixed, bring the plant up to standards, and then turn it back on. Or maybe that's 2 to 4 years. I don't know. That's currently. That timeline's got to get shrunk. Maybe you're looking at a brand new location and you're going to do it with established design technology. That would be an example of AP1000 that they built at Vogel. How does that one work? Well, you still got to get a site license from NRC to build it in that location and how you're going to build it and all the impacts. So that's a site license, 1 to 4 years. You have to get a combined license then to do both. But because it's established technology, like the light water boiler reactors are in many cases, then maybe you can actually start digging a hole in the ground 4 years from now. And then how long does it take to build? Anywhere from 3 to 7 years or whatever. So there's your timeline for a new location with existing approved technology. But what if you want to jump on the bandwagon of all the features and benefits and perceptions of small modular reactors being safer, and you want to do that? Now we're really talking some time, because the technology, for the most part, has never been approved by NRC, one of the 6 or 8 that are floating around in the world. So you got to get a site license, you got to get a design certification, then you roll to your coal, which is another couple, 3, 4 years, and then you can go build it. And so now we got a timeline of what, almost 10 years. The TVA in Oak Ridge is an example where they're down the road to build a small modular reactor. I'll show you a list of many others that are in some phase of either early planning, early filing, or significant engineering has been completed on the technology. For the most part, as most of you know, we're following many in the world that do have shovels in the ground to put an SMR in. Will our first one be a year from now because of what changed in Washington in the next 3 or 4 months? Or will it be the first one runs 10 years from now? And if that's the case, it's sure not going to help us much with the deficit supply of electricity. So the last one that I want to go over and just show you an example of, this is a blessing from Duke Power, but they've put together a very realistic pathway to get an SMR built and fully operational. For the most part, it's 10 years. It's unacceptable. We don't have to take that long. We could cut that schedule in half with some modifications of either money, time, NRC regulatory, or other legislation, regulation, whether it be federal, state, or local. So that's our challenge. And all of you, I hope, when you talk to your politicians and your owners of major companies that need the juice, like many of the data centers, I hope that you kind of encourage the fact that things could speed up considerably. We could have these all over the place running in 3 to 4 years from now if we make some changes. Look at some of the jobs that are either proposed or under construction that are just small modular reactors and where they're at: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Iowa, Virginia, Canada, Wyoming, Tennessee. What's common with a lot of these SMRs is they're either in a government facility that needs independence in electric generation. They're close to or will be to a mass of data AI centers being constructed around this reactor, or they're in a populous area close to a quality transmission, which is a whole huge issue, but I'm not going to get most of you understand that our grid is in trouble, and that's got to be fixed too. You go into industry now, and you've got chemical manufacturing plants and refineries looking at them. You've got a lot of utilities, obviously, for power, but they're spread around areas where there's a good possibility that folks will allow it to be built in that area. So they're built around areas or locations where not in my backyard mentality has been quantified, not necessarily fixed, but quantified. So there's a lot of these, and there's a lot of money, venture capital or private equity, that's being spent in the initial stages of this, or the development of the technologies. And some of them are way down the road, some of them are still pretty hypothetical, yet to be proven for ramp up, where you can do 6, 8, 9 megawatts, not a small microreactor that can only do small energy or steam output. So it's encouraging that there's this many activities going on, but the common denominator for all these is things going through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to get licensing is too slow, and that's what we have to fix. That is a tougher challenge than the money. Look at some of the dollars these things cost or could cost. Small modular reactors, whether it's light water or heavy, much of that being technology that's semi-understood, you can see that we're looking at somewhere around $2 million per million megawatts produced. If you look at some of the advanced reactors, which are reactors typically that have alternative cooling systems, mostly heavy metals, so salt molten reactors that cool, TerraPower is an example, and in the front, Kairos, many others, more money per kilowatt, but portable, smaller. Serial number 4, 5, and 6 will be built very quickly and less money. If you look at Gen 3 reactors, which is basically Vogtle, traditional design, understood, safety is completely secure, but they're pretty big and they're pretty expensive because they're large reactors, 1,000 megawatts, right? Got lots of good options. We'll see the cost go down dramatically after serial number 1 and 2 is built. Question is, if serial number 1 and 2 is projected to cost $3.5 billion, but because there's so many unknowns, it ends up final price at $5 billion, who's going to pick up that delta so that the investor has security that it's a fixed price investment with a fixed known output so that they can calculate correctly their return on their money? So some of the investment sources, as you all know, venture capital is important. The owner's balance sheet, like Microsoft, is very important. And a lot of the United States taxpayers' money being either used as a guarantee or a subsidy or a loan or grant is important. And that's why I think Trump has the entire budget put on hold today and frozen today, because it's time to restack the deck in appropriations that's more logical to support the U.S. economy's growth. I think, again, I'm just a concrete constructor. How do I know all this stuff? But I have a passion that each of you in the room will enjoy the benefits of nuclear power in the next 6 to 8 years. I really do, if we all work together at pushing it. So a lot of the quality programs are very rigid. Some of that needs to be loosened up. because safety aspects of a small contained modular reactor that's built and fueled sometimes in a manufacturing facility where it's all controlled, brought out to a site and put in a hole, has a lot less risk than, say, Vogtle or 3 Mile Island or some of the traditional ones. But the huge barrier to entry is not, can we get the construction people or the engineering people to do it? It's, where is this specialty equipment, vessels, valves, and turbines, and all this other stuff that is new in design, where is that going to be manufactured? Right now, it's not here. We just don't even have the facilities. So we got to kick that in the butt, or we're going to be spending a lot of time buying stuff overseas, which they too have large voids. So this whole supply thing has got to be solved as well. Most of you know that if you're a contractor and you built a nuclear power plant, because of the PAAA agreement done many, many years ago, so that there would not be risk for a large EPC contractor to be at risk of absorbing an accident and the cost associated with that, you're indemnified if you're qualified as an NQA1 constructor or equipment manufacturer or engineer. That doesn't guarantee that you're not liable for the performance of that plant. You're not liable anymore if there is an accident. Highly unlikely, particularly in SMRs. Supply chain's key, craft's key, and then permitting. How long does it take? You got local, state, and federal permitting many times. You've got plenty of public that are going to scream bloody murder, that we're all going to get exposed to tons of radiation from accidents, and it's really, really bad to have a nuclear bomb in our backyard. And most of you know that there's absolutely no relationship between a nuclear bomb, engineering, specification, and what goes on in a power plant, particularly with some of the what I would say danger factor or percent of formulation of the fuels. Some of it it's so low you could literally put it in this room and let it sit around for a couple of days and none of us would be affected. Other stuff that's 90% that goes in a warhead, 14 seconds of that and you're probably in real bad trouble, even if it's on the other side of this room. So, reasons for optimism. Well, big one is we need the power. Not only do we need the supply, but we need predictable pricing. And nuclear gives you long-term costs. The only variable a little bit after it's built is operating and maintenance and fuel generation. But for most part, the capital expense has been made as a part of the construction. So you can predict long-term. You can put down for 10 years or 15 years, this is the cost of electricity to a user. And that's a big deal. You can't with fossil, and you can't with many others because there's a lot of variables of increasing costs that we don't know what they are 10 or 15 years from now, much less regulation. So the capital investment's important. We need the government and the state and the public authorities to really get involved, potentially underpin some of the cost risks of serial number 1 and 2, and then get this done. And I'm pretty sure we're going to see that coming out of legislation in the next 6 to 8 months, because it is the logical solution, right? So what does CURT members benefit and have responsibility? Does the membership in here see a reasonable return on investment and understand the associated risk? That's an ongoing education process that's changing every day. Does nuclear power projects provide a reasonable business case for a good return on investment of your money? As a constructor, as an engineer, or as a person in the supply chain, what are your opportunities? Lots and lots and lots. If there's $90 billion that's going to be spent, as a conservative number, could have easily put 250 billion, but right now, given the state of regulatory approvals and underpinning cost overruns, it's not going to happen very fast. But I'm optimistic a year from now, the landscape will look different. And Baker Concrete Construction and Floor and every other person in the room is going to be able to see good opportunities coming down the lane in nuclear power. And Kurt's going to have more members to join because we got more people in the play. So engineering technology is huge for all of you. All the construction is there. And again, the supply chain, substantially. We need more NQA1 certified fabrication, pipe plants, vessel plants, valves, turbines. We need all that in this country eventually, so that we can be independent of the rest of the USA. So watch this space closely, particularly after what has happened today with the freeze on the energy budget. See if that restacking of prioritization you can influence because of your friends that are senators and congressmen. I know Greg's probably going to make a dozen calls this afternoon to all the power brokers he knows in Ohio. The demand in the economy, we're assuming that the substantial demand forecasted for the increased use and need for electricity is valid and will continue, and maybe it will actually be more given the electrification effort and the technology effort and AI and the healthy economy. Global. I mean, this is a solution for people that don't have electricity except 2 hours a day in the middle of India, where the birth could occur when there is no juice and the baby probably won't live. This is a solution for famine. This is a solution for a lot of things, but we got a lot of work cut out, and so does the globe. So that's what we're about. I'm personally about the passion. Obviously, we, for 28 years now, have been doing NQA1 nuclear concrete construction, either for the Department of Energy or for the NRC-regulated public-private industries that are messing with nuclear, or building fuels for submarines and all that. We've been doing that for a long time, and it's tedious and it's difficult, and it's not everybody's kind of work. And we're hugely short of young talent growing up, understanding the technologies surrounding nuclear power and nuclear construction. So we've got a lot of people that are pretty smart in this space that happen to be 74. So, you know, nature's nature, and they're just not going to be able to be there. So bringing this up. So I spent a little bit of time pushing money toward the nuclear engineering school at Purdue as an example, because we really need it bad, big time. So that's pretty much what it's about. You've got the slideshow, so if you want to learn a little bit about Baker, if you don't know us. For those of you in the room that are either interested in this PowerPoint or interested in integrated project delivery teaming with folks that love to be in nuclear construction, I'm right here after this is over. And with that, I'll turn it over to questions, Greg. I hope nobody got dizzy when I walked back and forth, but that's how
we're perfectly good. And there's several questions actually that came in. The first one is, what are the unintended consequences of this initiative? Have you given any thought to the unintended consequences, things that could happen that were negative and unexpected?
One of them would be that currently 40% of our fuels that go into submarines that are really nothing different than small modular reactors and going into our power plants are manufactured in Russia. So we got to fix that, or we're now feeding Russia a lot of money because we need more nuclear fuels. There's a lot of nuclear plants, or there's a lot of nuclear centrifuge plants and other ways of processing nuclear fuels on the books in the country, but until they get offtake orders to load the SMRs, they're not going to build that plant either. And that's another NRC regulated construction project that could take 7 to 8 years. We built a fuels plant in West Texas, Urenco, centrifuge plant, turned out great. They want to build another one in order to be able to supply SMRs. I said, when do you want us to go up there and start working? He said, as soon as I get off takes, and then I can get financing. There you go.
Got it. One of the questions, with the release of DeepSeek and its tremendously smaller footprint and relative power needs compared to OpenAI, Meta, Google, do you see that causing a potential slowdown in the need for power as we move forward?
First sentence one more time.
Yes. With the release of DeepSeek and its tremendously smaller footprint and relative power need compared to OpenAI, Meta, and Google, do you see that causing a slowdown in the need for power instead of a ramp up in the need for power?
I'm going to plead the fifth on that, because that's a technical area that I'm just starting to study.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Any idea how far we are from firing up commercial fusion reactors?
15 is a wild guess.
By the way, anybody in the audience is free to weigh in on some of these questions as well. So if you have some answers or resources or perspectives, opinions, feel free to raise your hand and be recognized. We'll get a mic to you.
There's some parts in the world we're getting really close.
Do you see small, mini, or micro plants being owned by communities versus big energy companies? In other words, to supply power for their own town, so it's a community.
Absolutely. Ideal situation to be able to solve not only the grid problem, because now the power is 8 miles outside of town, but it's also, again, a cost thing. They now know what juice is going to cost them for the next 20 years. That's not true with renewable or fossil currently because of so many unknown costs associated.
With terrorism a major concern, is terrorism the highest risk for nuclear-based units in our VUCA world?
Yeah, really good question. Very low, very, very, very low because of the way they're built, particularly with the SMRs, because most of the 70–80% of the facility will be 100 foot down into the ground in many of these layouts. So it makes, it's tough to get to anything with any kind of nuclear warhead when she's deep down in the ground and there's 25,000 yards of flowable fill concrete surrounding it. The big units, always a question about that, but you've all seen the size and rigidity of the 7-foot walls that are double steel, double concrete. It would take a hit just constantly before, and by then, even the threat of the hit, the whole thing goes cold now. You can cool that down within 30 minutes completely, and it becomes inert.
For SMRs and ARs, what are they what's the sizing, and I'm not sure I understand the question precisely, spent fuel pool for? Are they, what are they sizing the spent fuel pool for? If somebody who asked the question wants to add a little bit of elucidation, that'd be great.
I'm not sure, but some of it can be talked about. What are we going to do with spent fuel?
Yes.
Canada has a phenomenal project under construction where what we had in Vegas at one time before it was closed was 3,000 meters down below the earth that spent fuel's going, and then it's almost impossible to ever have an issue. We need to do the same thing. Right now, all the spent fuel, for those of you who don't know, they go in these cool caskets. And those caskets then are either left in the backyard of the plant that's currently running and are shipped off to another location to where's the caskets. Those caskets are good to maybe 100 to 120 years. After that, we got an issue. So we still have waste processing is a big opportunity because there's lots of the fuels that are coming out reactors now that can easily be recentrifuged and reprocessed to be a lower potential good nuclear fuel for SMRs. And that'll be our big solution to nuclear waste. But in the meantime, we got to find a hole, which we haven't.
Back in the mid-70s, slowpoke reactors were offered to the world. Non-military grade reactors. Is it time for these scaled units to be built, either again or continuing to be built?
Absolutely. It's perfect. And and a lot of you know, the Department of Energy's got a huge initiative to create an environment where the bases, military bases in the country, have their own secure power. Putting an SMR in the ground where it's safe and can't be touched only for that base means that we don't care if they blow out the grid around it, right? They're fine. It's safe. It's secure.
Historically, Kurt has avoided legislative vigilance so as not to get diametrically opposed one owner to another. For example, it's possible that perhaps Southern Company could be diametrically opposed to a position than Procter & Gamble. For example, how should Kurt, this seems like a unifying issue, how should Kurt move forward? You've mentioned several times talking about senators and congressional delegations being informed. How can we move forward to inform the legislators of the need for these things?
Well, we all know what lobbyists does. We all know what big bucks with lobbyists does. And we all know that a phone call to our local senator all have an impact on how you feel about this. So we need to spend more time building up the logic, the safety, and the cost effectiveness of going this direction, and what can Congress do legislation-wise to help NRC operate at a faster pace, or help the financial risk associated with serial number 1 or 2 when it's built.
Great. That's all the questions we have. Is there any from the audience? Last Chance Cafe? Seeing none, let's give our appreciation to Bob. That very, very good presentation. Thank you so much, Bob. Appreciate it.